When we talk about economic inequality, we almost always frame it as a problem for the 99%. But what if the biggest threat from this massive wealth gap is actually to the 1% themselves? That's the really provocative idea we're digging into today, and it's all based on the work of economists Joseph Stiglitz and Linda Bilmes. So here's the big question. Could it be that these huge fortunes at the very top are actually built on ground that's getting shakier by the day? According to the source material we're looking at, the answer is a big, flashing yes. And the reasons why, well, they might not be what you think. And look, this isn't just some abstract theory from an ivory tower. Investor Warren Buffett famously put it bluntly. He said, "There's been class warfare, and my class, the rich class, has been winning." That quote, it just nails the reality that Stiglitz and Bilmes are about to break down for us. Okay, but if you're winning, why would you worry, right? Well, here's the twist. The core argument here is that this win might actually be a pretty hollow victory in the long run. The very system that's allowing for this incredible wealth pileup is, according to this research, becoming dangerously unstable. See, the authors argue that when that gap between the rich and everyone else becomes a giant chasm, the whole economic structure starts to wobble. And that instability, it doesn't just threaten the poor or the middle class. It threatens everybody, and that includes those at the absolute top. So just how wide is this gap we're talking about? The numbers presented in the research are, well, they're pretty jaw-dropping. Okay, get this. The research points out that the wealth of the Walmart family heirs is about the same as the combined wealth of the entire bottom 30% of Americans. Just let that sink in for a second. That's one family's fortune equaling the wealth of around 100 million people. And this isn't just a story about the rich getting richer. It's also about pretty much everyone else getting left in the dust. For most Americans, their real income, what your money can actually buy, has basically flatlined for decades. It feels like the economic pie is getting bigger, but your slice just keeps shrinking. So what's the big deal? What actually happens when this gap gets so massive? Well, the article argues that this kind of extreme inequality creates four major, and often hidden, costs that are like a drag on the entire economy. So we're going to break down these four problems one by one. There's the consumption problem, the rent-seeking problem, the fairness problem, and the mistrust problem. Let's kick things off with how all this affects what we buy. All right, first up is the consumption problem, and it all comes down to a pretty simple idea. People with lower and middle incomes tend to spend most of every new dollar they get on things they need. The wealthy, on the other hand, tend to save a lot more of it. So when a huge chunk of the money gets concentrated at the very top, less of it gets pumped back into the economy through spending. That can actually shrink demand and even lead to more unemployment. Next up, we've got the rent-seeking problem. Now, rent-seeking sounds kind of technical, right? But the idea behind it is super important. It basically means getting rich without actually creating any new wealth. It's about rigging the system to get a bigger slice of the existing pie, maybe through special tax breaks or getting monopoly power. And a scale of this, it's just massive. The source uses the financial sector as a prime example, which in recent years has captured something like 40% of all corporate profits. A huge chunk of that profit, the argument goes, isn't from making new stuff or providing better services. It's from these rent-seeking plays that just shuttle wealth upward. Okay, the third cost they talk about is the fairness problem. And this goes way beyond just hurt feelings. When a lot of people start to believe the whole game is rigged, that has real economic consequences. I mean, why would you work harder if you feel like all the rewards are just going to get vacuumed up by the people at the top? It really erodes motivation and hurts productivity. And look, this isn't just a feeling people have. There's data to back it up. The source makes the case that the classic American dream, that idea that anyone can make it if they work hard, is on some seriously shaky ground. The US now actually has less social mobility than many other developed countries. That means the odds of a kid from a poor family making it to the top are lower here than in places like Canada or parts of Scandinavia. And that brings us to the last one, the mistrust problem. Think about it. Trust is like the invisible glue that holds our whole economy together. We trust that contracts will be honored, that the rules are basically fair for everyone. But Stiglitz and Bilmes argue that massive inequality eats away at that trust, which can lead to gridlock and makes it almost impossible to solve big, collective problems. So you've got all these problems piling up: consumption, rent-seeking, fairness, mistrust. What do we do about it? Well, the answer in the article is unexpected. It's not about charity.
It's not about altruism, it's about something much more practical: good old fashioned self interest.
The argument is actually pretty simple. The wealthy should get behind policies that reduce inequality, not because it's the nice thing to do, but because it's the smart thing to do. A stable, growing economy is a much better and safer environment for everyone to do well in, and that includes the people at the very top. So, what does that actually look like? Well, the article points to big public investments that create more opportunity for everyone. We're talking about things like better education to build a more skilled workforce, modern infrastructure to make everything run more efficiently, healthcare to keep people healthy and productive, and of course, a fair tax system to help pay for it all. At the end of the day, these aren't just social programs. The argument is that they are direct investments in the foundation of the economy itself. A healthier, more educated population creates a much more dynamic and resilient economic engine for the country. It's that classic idea that a rising tide lifts all boats. And yes, that includes the yachts. And that really leaves us with a big question to chew on. The whole argument here is that you just can't have sustainable prosperity for a tiny few without having shared prosperity for the many. So, what do you think? Are the long term interests of the 1% and the 99% maybe, just maybe, more connected than we ever thought?